During Biden, things were a lot more liberal. Now the pendulum is swinging back, and Silicon Valley is a big part of that.
I once got kicked out of a house party at Oxford University for calling the host a capitalist pig, which he didn't appreciate. It was Michael.
Yo everyone, welcome back. Brand new Techish in the building. It is me, Michael Bahane, the CEO of Pocket and Pocket Jobs, and I'm joined with
Abadesi, CEO of Hustle Crew.
Hustle Crew. So apparently, like a lot of Stanford students now, they used to want to work in big tech. They used to want to do Meta, Google Life, Alphabet Life. Now, apparently, they want to work in the defense industry. So the article has a quote here where someone said, basically, I have a lot of friends working at space or defense companies. Palantir, Andrew, SpaceX, said one Stanford senior studying computer science. He said that the Trump administration was one factor in the change. During Biden, things were a lot more liberal. Now the pendulum is swinging back, and Silicon Valley is a big part of that. Anyway, so how do you feel about students looking and assessing their environment and saying, this is where the big bucks are, is in defense? Do you have qualms about that?
I once got kicked out of a house party at Oxford University for calling the host a capitalist pig, which he didn't appreciate. Yeah, it was Michael.
It was me. It was Michael.
But I mean, I think I sent you the story and I was like, oh God, the youth of today are morally bankrupt. But I was being like facetious, like, you know, it's a bit harsh. I think there's always been like a student mindset, which is I'm here because, you know, I'm going into debt. And I'm taking all this time because I want to maximize my earnings. And the way to do that is investment banking or big tech. And now it's, you know, defense companies. Everyone's gearing up for World War III or whatever. So I'm not surprised, but I was also a bit sad because I kind of wanted this article to read like, you know, the graduates of the elite universities want to solve the most important, urgent problems like climate change and social inequality and economic injustice. You're shaking your head.
Hell no. Hell no, that's never been the case, and that never will be the case. You know what? The stereotype of students as the ones who are protesting and fighting for fighting the powers that be. That is actually a small slither of students. Most students are head down trying to get into the most high-paying job they can get into. And when I was at university, I knew so many people who just couldn't wait to work in finance, banking, all of these boring, evil industries, but you can get rich basically. So there never has been any sort of moral through line for students in terms of what work they're willing to do, straight up. And I'm not surprised. You know, even when I did a master's in computer science, I was struggling to get people to even want to work in startups because they were just like, listen, there's no money there. I want to work, you know, for JP Morgan. And I understood why. And also it's hard being a young person. Like it's such a more cutthroat world. Like to get onto the property ladder is basically near on impossible. You need to be earning big bucks. So I understand why people just focus on the numbers. 2, going to university is not a cheap endeavor. You're straddled with debt. They've made it a very cutthroat thing. And then 3, the people that go to elite universities are normally the children of the elite themselves. And more times than not, if you are elite, it is not because you are kumbaya saving the world type person. You are somebody who makes money in the real world, in a real way, in a cutthroat way. Yeah, well, I don't even know, but you're just not somebody who's prioritized saving the world. You prioritize making money. Yeah, maybe. So like, do we expect your children to be something completely different? I think where people get frustrated with students is that they may pay lip service to something higher. I saw some people go to protest.
Champagne socialists.
And then the next week, no, not even just that. But I mean, because most people that would espouse the sort of socialist values, you would like to believe there's some truth there in what they believe. But I saw people go to protest, and I know for a fact they didn't believe it, and they just wanted to go live the quiet life, get the job, and they were just there because it was the socially acceptable thing to do in that environment. And they were going to go to other environments and do the socially acceptable thing there, which might have been the 180. So I've seen it all. But what do you make about this whole vibe shift? Now Trump has changed the game in tech, now being right-wing, military, it's all cool. Do you buy into that, or do you just think, listen, just go for the money and shut up?
Well, of course, I don't think people should just go for the money and shut up. I literally did a talk at the university this week. No, I'm saying, are they just go for the money? No, I'm saying, are they just going for the money, or is it the actual vibe shift that they're speaking of that's actually playing a factor? Oh, I see. No, I think it's more reflective of like the macro trends for sure. Like one, you know, there's an ideological shift happening at a geopolitical scale. It's been happening for a while. And then secondly, they probably just see more financial opportunity. Like a lot of the big tech companies, stock prices are falling. They're not growing as rapidly as they used to in terms of their market cap and their value. So they're looking to the next frontier. Defense is that. And yeah, you know, it's a very privileged thing to even say, like, I want to build a career based on impact that optimizes for impact. And a lot of people don't start off with that I think a lot of us do start off with making money, and then we just become so depressed and disillusioned that we go, well, if I'm going to die for something, let it at least be on my own terms, like, or at least my own dreams, my own values, not someone else's.
Yeah, and you can't forget the fact of the layoffs that happened in big tech. Not that safe and secure job that it once was. If you're a student and you're looking at people with 5 years experience getting laid off at Facebook or Apple or Meta or Google, you're going to think like, what chance do I have? Do you know what I'm saying? But there are a few standout quotes from this article that make me just laugh so much. So one of the main characters in the article is a young lady. She basically said, in great power politics, people die. Often more impulsive, less pragmatic men make these decisions. And as a well-educated woman, I'd rather be in the room. So that's quote number one that made me laugh. What do you think of like that concept of just like, listen, the evil's going down. It might as well be pragmatic, well-educated
woman in the room. The voice of reason in the sea of evil.
Not these like, silly men. Like, does that ring true to you, or like, what's your perspective on that quote?
I mean, is it naivety or optimism, or are they two sides of the same coin? I don't know. Like, telling yourself that you're better off in the system fighting it than outside of it. It's not a new attitude. Maybe it's plausible, but it definitely has a bit of naivety in there.
Yeah. I think one thing we have to establish also is that Silicon Valley was basically built on the defense industry initially. So that's that part. So this is the pro argument. Other argument is that Google and a lot of these other big tech companies have been working with the military to do work. A lot of this AI technology is going to be used with military applications. And then the last argument is basically, listen, if you're going to live in a country, there's a military, people are going to serve that military. You can change the politicians to change the laws, but does that mean you should have no part in the armed forces or in that kind of sector? I don't know. That's a question that I debate sometimes. I had a friend who worked in cybersecurity, and then all of a sudden he was saying to me like, listen, if the military came calling and I had to do some cybersecurity stuff, I would do it. And I was like, good for you. I don't know. I'm not going to say no, because it is a bit hypocritical to live in a country and say, I want nothing to do with the armed forces or the military in that society. Like, it's a bit difficult. I struggle to square that circle. Even if I can say I don't agree with these. Go on.
Sometimes I just wish for more for humanity, I just wish for more. I just feel like we're just so stuck in like these holding patterns. It's like, I want the world to be a better place. I mean, unless I have to earn less money to do it, in which case I'm very happy to defend the status quo and perpetuate oppression. Oh, yeah. I will be an agent of violence. I'll be an agent of oppression because... and then, I'm so sad. Like, people are dying, innocent people are dying, or there's injustice and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, I just wish for more for us sometimes. That's all. I'm not saying it's possible. Maybe we're stuck in these holding patterns for a reason.
No, I agree.
But yeah.
No, I agree with you. It's very difficult when, you're a citizen of a country and that country partakes in wars and overseas military endeavors that you just don't agree with. And then, someone's telling you, I want to work for that. What do you say to them? It's difficult, right? But yeah, so sign up to Palantir's career page. Link in the show notes. No, I'm joking. Sponsored by Palantir.
Pay us first.
So the other thing about youngish people, you sent me a screenshot of a Substack which was talking about how this young person envied basically being a journalist 10 years ago. So they were kind of romanticizing, and I've heard this before, people are romanticizing that BuzzFeed-Era where you just, you worked in Brooklyn and you went down, you wrote your little listicle articles, and, there was a well-paid job doing that. What was your perspective when you, like, why did you send me that screenshot? What did it ring true to you?
I just found it funny because I remember when I was doing my Financial Times internship in 2009, and like the mentor that I was given, who was, maybe 20 years older than me, was like, do not get a job in journalism. He was like, do not join an industry that's like dying or fighting for survival when you're at the like cusp of your career, like the beginning of your career. And that was 2009. And then here's someone in the 2020s going, oh, if only I could have lived in the 2010s and like been a journalist then. It was so much better then. And I kind of just thought, it just felt very like revisionist history, to kind of go like, glory days for internet journalism, like 10 years ago. Yeah, it was.
But it's interesting because if something is declining and continues to decline, then the person who's at the bottom of that decline is going to look at other parts of the decline that were much higher up on the scale of decline and be like, that was a better time. I mean, technically speaking, it was. People still believe that you could make money doing internet journalism. There was still the idea that a BuzzFeed could work, or a Mashable could work, or a TechCrunch could work. I think TechCrunch today actually is being sold off for parts. So there was that optimism. But obviously, if you were then, you were thinking, actually, when there was magazines, and magazines were selling for like $10 and millions of magazines were being sold, that obviously was a better time. And when millions of newspapers were being sold, that clearly was a better time. So yeah, it's just interesting that we romanticize eras that we just missed because it was at an earlier stage of decline than the industry that, is declining even further. It's interesting because also what that person's advice was very sage. you do not want to be in a sinking ship. So often what you view as someone's success is because of the fact they just caught the right tailwind. They were in the right industry. Timing. They were in AI. Yeah, they were in AI, or they were doing what we were doing 4 or 5 years ago, 3 years ago, when it looked like, you couldn't go wrong in our space, basically, right? And it wasn't because of our genius. It's just because there was the right tailwinds, giving us a push. So yeah, and our genius, that too, yeah, and looks. So all I'm going to say is pick the right vertical, pick the right industry, that can go a long way in making sure that your career goes well. You put a note here about students lacking perspective. What was you saying about, you said you did a talk with some young people. Like what was the lack of perspective that you saw?
Well, I mentioned that I spoke at a university and then I spoke at a school, and, I was there trying to come with all the big visions at my big age about, building a career based on impact, building a career in line with your values. And people were just like, what was it like to do your degree at your uni? Like, what was it like to work at this job? And I just realized, when you're younger, you're only looking at the next step. Like the world is only as big as what you've seen so far. So if you've been at school most of your life, you're kind of looking at the next stage of education, right? If you've been in secondary school, high school, you're looking at university. If you're at university, you're looking at getting your first job. So a lot of the things that we talk about when we're 10 plus years into our career just feel really abstract.
Yeah.
And too zoomed out. There's no perspective to talk about a career in alignment with my values. What is my value? My value is like money, independence. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just really reflecting on, the gift of perspective that comes with age. And yeah, it was just interesting. Also, when you're young, you're the oldest you've ever been, so you feel really old. But when I was in that classroom, I was like, oh, you guys look young. Y'all look young.
Do you think, I feel sorry for that generation and cohort, because they're probably more aware of how much money makes the world go round. I'm not saying that this is a new thing, but like, they go on their Instagram and they go on their TikTok and they see lifestyle. They see lifestyle content and they want to have that lifestyle. They want money. They go and see, their elder siblings maybe struggle to get a house, or struggle, to get a life that they want, having flatmates and roommates up until the age of 32 and stuff like that. So do you think they just have a very clear-eyed perspective on just like, yo, for me to win, I've got to just make money and I've got to grind. So tell me, what is it like to get into one of the top universities? Because I know that's going to get me closer to the bag. Like, I don't want to hear about, lifestyle balance and life balance and all that kind of esoteric stuff that I can worry about later.
I think that mindset is new. Like, I've just finished reading Crime and Punishment, which was written like in the late 1800s, right? So that's like 150 something years ago, like nearly 2 centuries ago. And it centers on like a student who is like desperate to find work and always feels broke and hates that he lives in this tiny room and never has food to eat and his shoes are all busted out and his hat is last season and la la la. Like, I think that awareness that, money is the conduit to choice and happiness, I don't think that's new, but I think social media has exacerbated the pressure on the individual to like live up to unrealistic expectations, because you're just under scrutiny so much more. At least like in the past, you could kind of hide. You could hide at your parents' house. You could hide, no one needed to be in your business, but this pressure to perform life and perform success, I think, is what makes it like really, really difficult, where people are like, if I have nothing to say, then I'm worthless. And that's sad and not true.
Yeah, it's difficult. Stay strong, young kids, and stay off social media, because it's all BS.
How are they going to watch our show if they're not on social media, though? Just subscribe. Nice.
Just subscribe on your podcast. Exactly, right? Long form content on your earphone. There you go.
Into the app.
So there was a piece of content that has stirred up a bit of debate. So Gary Stevenson, who is an economist, who I think he went to the LSE actually as well, and he ended up becoming a trader. Why is everyone talking
about this guy? All the men in my life just keep mentioning this man. He's like captured the millennial male zeitgeist. Anyway, continue.
I mean, his book is the #1 bestseller, I think, for the last 7 to 8 weeks, and he's been on all the big podcasts, basically, right? He's someone who came from a working class background, managed to make a lot of money as a trader, betting against the recovery of the economy. He constantly bet that basically middle class and working class people would get poorer based on the policies of the government of the day. And then he's basically now taking his funds, however many millions that he made, and now he's basically gone on the content creator circuit, essentially imploring people to ask their politicians to tax the super rich, basically, because if they don't, your chances of having a good life and having wealth for you and your children are going down. So his essential thesis is that because the super rich have so much money, they are able to buy up all assets. So let's say, for example, housing, there's a limited amount of stock of housing. There's not an infinite amount of housing. Now, if there's a cohort of people at the top who have 70% of the wealth, 80% of the wealth, 90% of the wealth, they are basically going to constantly be bidding up all this housing, and you as a normal 25-year-old, 26-year-old won't have a shot. And that the only way we can really bring back some manner of social mobility is if there are fair and equitable taxes on the super rich, and that actually people on income tax are overtaxed, which I agree with. Yeah. I do think people on income tax are overtaxed. But anyway, so he went on Diary of a CEO, and he basically took part in a debate with this other guy called Daniel Presley, who is more of an entrepreneur, more of a tech mogul, more of a I started companies, I've got 10 companies, hustle culture type person. And essentially it was a debate between messaging. Daniel Presley, the entrepreneur person, was arguing that your message is disempowering to young people. Essentially, you are basically saying you have no hope, you have no chance. All we need to worry about is taxing the rich, but it doesn't give a message to an individual. How do I improve my circumstances? And Daniel Priestley was like, we should be encouraging people to be entrepreneurial, blah, blah, blah. So obviously, listen, you haven't seen the debate, and I'm obviously summarizing it in a very short form way. Yeah. But essentially, it's a tension between people who are very much like pro individual agency, get the government out of my way. We need to unlock people's entrepreneurial capabilities. And somebody saying, actually, right now, that's all worthless. Really and truly, like most young people are not going to get wealth in this society the way it's set up right now. There's going to be the outliers. There's going to be the few that make it. But essentially, we're screwing over an entire cohort of people. And that we're heading towards a more Brazil, India style model where there's a giant pyramid and masses are at the bottom and there's a small slither who have all of the assets and all of the wealth. Because just like in Thomas Piketty's book, Capital, wealth compounds faster than what labor can produce. Wealth compounds faster than even actually what the economy can grow. Because if you've had your assets in the stock market, maybe your wealth's gone up 20%. The economy has grown maybe 1%, 2%, 3%. So then you can actually just take all those extra returns and just buy up all the assets and screw over somebody who's been making 40K for the last 5 years. Brief. What say you? What's your thoughts on anything I said? I said a lot. Sorry, I summarized like an argument, a whole YouTube show. But like, what do you?
It's just interesting because I just feel like a version of this conversation happens like every few years, and then like nothing really changes. Like I was thinking of Thomas Piketty the whole time you're talking. I mean, I have Capital on my bookshelf back there. I mean, I didn't finish it, but it's fine. I listened to the podcast.
I was gonna say,
bruv. No one ever finishes an economics book thinking fast and slow. So yeah, true. You read the first few chapters, you watch a few YouTube videos, you have enough to debate at a dinner party. That's fine. Yeah. But yeah, a version of this conversation comes up every few years. You know, the accelerating gap between the richest and the poorest. And it's obviously like a hot topic now because we're in a cost of living crisis. And I can't predict the future. You know, I can't predict the future. I don't know who is right. But if I think of my own youth and what inspired me, it wasn't tax systems or anything like that. I wasn't thinking in terms of microeconomic policy or anything like that. I was just inspired by like the stories of people I saw who looked like me and who felt relatable to me. And whatever's been happening so far isn't creating enough different types of successful people for future generations to be excited about. You know, you turn on the radio, you hear the same kind of voices, you turn on the TV, you see the same kind of people. It's getting better, but there's still such a long way to go. So I'm just in favor of whatever policy is going to create more opportunities for people from historically marginalized groups to access power and build platforms.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part though, because what are those policies? So we can all say we're in favor, but it's like when push comes to shove, is it taxing the rich? Is it cutting taxes? Like, you know, there's the age-old argument, you know, of like what actually stimulates and spurs growth for the most amount of people. And from my perspective, my personal theory that I've always thought about for a very long time, and I said this almost 10 years ago to a mate of mine about why I thought the UK was going to struggle, is just that we have so much wealth in land and property that it's very hard to prosperity in any other domain, in the sense that if you imagine what would make young people have a great chance to like build wealth is to be in a major city like London, where most of the wealth is generated, most of the major industries are generated, even just to service the people that are building the wealth. Let's say you're a barber, you're going to make more money as a barber in London than you would as a barber in a smaller city, right? But the asset prices of the houses are so expensive because there's no incentive to build any more housing. If you've got most of your country investing in property because they believe that's what's going to give them wealth for retirement, there's no incentive to say to people, actually, what we're going to do is build cheap and abundant housing. Yes, it will mean that your house will be worth half what you bought it, but that will mean that's better for the economy in general. But that will never ever happen, because the legend of this country is that you own a property, you get rich, and everyone has bought into that, and everyone has bought property thinking that this is going to be my wealth and this is what's going to be my vehicle for wealth. But that is an inherent contradiction, because it also means that if you're coming up underneath that person, you will never be able to catch up to me, because my house is going to continue to skyrocket and you're at ground level. Screw you, who cares? We're not going to build affordable housing everywhere throughout this country, because it means that people like me, for example, who own homes are going to face that burden. So that to me is the inherent contradiction. And once a country makes that decision and says housing is the wealth vehicle for most people, to me, it's the slow death roll of the country. And you might say, but what society is different? If you go to Germany, people rent and it's not a big deal. And the rent is affordable.
Yeah, but it's like it's apples and oranges, right? Because it's just like talking about guns. Like, no one's going to understand guns here, but you go to America and it makes complete sense. So I feel like it's really difficult to compare country by country, because you have like centuries of identity shaped around economic transactions and owning property and stuff like that. I mean, we still have a royal family. And the royal family technically owns all the land. So even when you own land, you're only just owning it because the royal family lets you. And they live by a completely different set of rules. And that's something that millions of people in this country support and love and respect. Even when the Times reported that Prince Harry and King Charles don't pay tax on most of the property that they own, that they're, charging rental to ambulances and hospitals and all that kind of stuff. So, there are a lot of things that are inherently British that don't make sense, but they make sense to enough people that they wouldn't, let's say, disband the royal family or redistribute wealth from royals to peoples or whatever. Like, literally, there have been revolutions around that. I mean, I think it's a very timely conversation because the current government is cutting a lot of disability support and welfare because the government's broke and the government doesn't have enough money. And a lot of people in Labour are saying, we have a lot of rich people in this country, so if we're out of money, we could just tax them and get more of it. But it's too, I don't know, I just feel like we have an entrenched establishment, and anything that attacks them never goes through because they own the media and they control the narrative. So it's just hard.
And also the burden ends up falling on people who are on regular employment income, PAYE, because it's like you're the person who can't go nowhere, really and truly. Like you, if you're earning, like the fact you're in the top tax bracket when you earn like 45k in this country is so insane. I know this sounds like a bitch fest in it, which I'm just moaning. But what I will say is that those people end up getting overtaxed because there's this idea that the super rich can just kind of up and leave. Anyways, I don't want to be too despondent. There's still opportunities to make money and do well and have a career and make a life. But I'm just saying that it's obviously something that I think is going to get harder and harder. But yeah, we'll leave it at that then, on that depressing note. Any final thoughts?
Not really. Just, write to your MP with your vision of the future and put them to work. If you're in the UK or wherever you are in a democracy, make your government work for you. We don't do that enough. I haven't asked my MP for a favor in a while. I'm due.
And no other men bother Abadesi to talk about Gary Stevenson. Enough, all right? No more. I was the last one. All right, cool. Bye, everyone. @TechishPod on Instagram, on all platforms. Watch us on YouTube and Spotify, and we'll catch you next week. Peace.